Bue-Said, Chief Executive of the Advantage Travel Partnership. And Julia, you're also an expert on European tourism. Good evening.
Good evening, Henry.
Hi. Now, both Paris and Bordeaux have been beset by violence, so you can understand why the king is no longer going. He was meant to go to both cities. But how concerned are you that many of the millions of Brits who visit Paris and France every year will say, if King Charles isn't going, then maybe nor should we?
Well, I think that's a very good question. And I think the scenes we're all seeing that are hitting the headlines right now are very worrying for any of us that are thinking of travelling. Something like 12 million Brits travel to France across the year. So, it's a major destination, a most visited country across Europe. So, very worrying. However, right now there is no advice or indications to say that we shouldn't be travelling there, despite the advice that's been given to the king, and all the FCDO advice. Right now points to the fact that travel can still resume. As always, making sure that if you're in an area where there is a big gathering, just to take precautions and just to be prepared that it will be busy. The problem also, Henry, is it coincides with strikes. So Not only do we have the disruptions that we are seeing and the protests, but there are strikes that will affect travellers, be it on the metro or some of the public services as well.
I'm just looking at the Foreign Office Travel Advisory. I always do this when I'm thinking of going to a country, because obviously it can also affect whether or not your insurance will pay out. Yeah. And they talk about, what's been happening since mid-March, the spontaneous protests, the ongoing strike action, as you said, what's going to happen on the 28th of March. And they say very, very blandly at the end, demonstrations can take place in France, often in major cities. If demonstrations do turn violent, a heavy police gendarmerie presence is to be expected. How correct do you think that tone is, given the pictures we've seen on our television and the reports we're hearing on the radio and online we're getting?
Well, I think I think it demonstrates that it's to be taken seriously. And as I say, the FCDO advice is quite clear that as and when, if the need to change advice has happened, they do react. The government does act quite quickly on that. So I think, as you quite rightly said, anyone travelling to France or anywhere, if you're travelling anywhere, travel insurance is so critical. Must make sure that you have travel insurance with you, and just stay alert and informed of the news before you travel, so you can be prepared, so you can make the right arrangements if you need to make any changes.
And when it comes to France as a draw, as you said, the number of people from the UK who go is huge, 12 million and rising. It's going to take a hit, though, isn't it, if this continues?
Absolutely. And the one thing we've all learned is confidence. It doesn't take a lot for confidence to go, does it? And considering what we've been through the last couple of years, 8% of France's GDP is from tourism. It takes tourism very seriously, but clearly Macron has a very big job to do to make sure that our confidence increases and that we feel comfortable about travelling there. The last thing that he's going to want to do is to continue impacting that, given the hit it's taken during COVID and the impact it has on their economy. So there's a big job for France to do to make sure reputationally this doesn't have a long-term impact. And as I say, right now for travellers, it's just making sure they really keep up to date with all the advice that they can travel safely and know what to expect.
And if people have been put off and they haven't booked their ticket yet, well, where do you think they're going to go? Is it going to be Greece or Spain, probably?
Yeah, well, this time of year, Italy is really high on the agenda, having a very strong year. Places like Greece, a little bit early at this time of year, don't quite get the weather and the resorts aren't always open. Spain is a really key destination, but even further afield, US, a lot of our travel agent members, the third selling destination right now is the US, so that's having a really good success factor. So lots of opportunities to travel elsewhere if people aren't really thinking about or wanting to travel to France right now. And lots of opportunities if they want to go away at the last minute, talking to a professional travel agent who can make sure they've got all the best and up-to-date advice.
I'm just wondering, actually, Julia, are there any parts of France that you know of that have relatively unscathed by all of this? Or is it pretty much happening all over the country and some of it spontaneously?
The reports we're getting is it really tends to be some of the main cities. If you go down to the Riviera, the French Riviera, some of the smaller, more rural destinations and resorts, actually life goes on as normal. You're not really seeing major impact. So yeah, it's not all of France. Key cities, but coastal regions are really not being impacted.
And at the moment, as Brits, even though we're no longer in the EU, we can go to France without any electronic, visa waiver or any like US-style ESTA. But that's going to change sooner or later, isn't it?
It absolutely is. So the ETIAS scheme, which is a very similar to what you said, that like the ESTA visa waiver form, that comes into play next year. So at the moment, it looks like it'll be about spring next year. And this will be where we have to apply in advance to travel. It will cost anywhere between €7 to €10. It will last for about 2 years. But we will all have to have one when we're travelling to the EU. So travel has changed. Freedom of movement, as we've been used to for almost all our lives, has changed. But a lot of this is also about improving home security and immigration as well. So we'll all get used to it, and it will be digital. So it shouldn't be. It won't really detract from us having to travel.
Yeah, and in the end, Julia, it's what we voted for by a narrow majority, but it's what we voted for, isn't it? So there you go.
There you go.
Julia, have a lovely weekend. I presume you're going to be off somewhere nice, so enjoy yourself and have a safe journey.
You too, Henry. All
Fantastic.
the best.
Great to talk
Take
to you,
care.
Julia Bue-Said, Chief Executive of the Advantage Travel Partnership. She's also an expert on European tourism.